For years, there was a persistent misconception among filmgoers that superhero films are only for kids. The genre had its origin as children's films or family entertainers, but from the late 80s and the 90s, superhero movies began including dark subject matters and violent scenes. Still, these examples were very few. Since the movies required a lot of budget to make, the studio wanted a PG-13 rating to get back their money and be on the safe side. However, things changed considerably with the unexpected success of Deadpool and Logan in 2 consecutive years. Both were R-rated ventures but became huge hits around the globe. This brought in a new wave of mature superhero films and shows that dealt with adult themes and real-world problems while still being true to the genre they're operating in. In today's video, we are taking a look at some of the greatest R-rated superhero movies of all time and discuss in detail about whether they truly earned their ratings. So, without further delay, let's get started. Dredd, 2012. First up is one of the most underrated superhero films of the 2010s, Dredd, starring Karl Urban as the law enforcement officer Judge Dredd, who operates in a violent and dystopian metropolis named Mega City 1. Based on the 2000 AD comic strip, created by John Wagner and Carlos Ezquerra, the film follows Dredd and his partner Judge Anderson as they investigate a triple homicide inside a 200-storied high-rise named Peachtrees and get caught up in a drug war led by the notorious criminal Mama. Directed by Pete Travis and written by Alex Garland, the film plays out like a relentless survival video game with Dredd and Anderson fighting their way through different levels of the building to finally get their hands on Mama. It never shies away from showing violence and features many uncomfortable sequences involving mutilation and blood splattering everywhere. The nonstop carnage brings out the lawless nature of futuristic America, but a few moments, including an eye-gouging scene and the one where a bullet melts a man's face, can be quite disturbing for viewers unfamiliar with the source material. The sequence that makes me flinch in particular is when Mama forces 3 drug dealers to take slow-mo, a new drug which slows down the user's perspective of time and then skins them alive before throwing them off the building. The violence itself happens mostly off-screen, but the implications alone make it one of the most disturbing scenes in any comic book adaptation, superhero or otherwise. As a lifelong fan of the source material, I think the film does a great job of adapting the chaotic energy of the urban wasteland, and Karl Urban gives a career-best lead performance that sadly went unnoticed due to its commercial failure. If you enjoy well-choreographed, hyper-stylized action filmmaking, give this one a chance and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Blade, 1998. Quite possibly the best Marvel film of the 90s, Blade is directed by Stephen Norrington and stars Wesley Snipes in the titular role of the human-vampire hybrid. Snipes' iconic performance remains one of the earliest examples of the perfect Marvel casting. Well, at least before Hugh Jackman's Wolverine or Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. The film also features Stephen Dorff as the villainous vampire Deacon Frost, along with Udo Kier and Boucher Wright and Donal Logue in supporting roles. It follows Blade as he wages a secret war against vampires to avenge the death of his mother and protect humanity. We watch him move around the hidden society of vampires in Los Angeles, using a mix of martial arts and weapons based on their weaknesses, like sunlight, garlic, and silver, all while trying to stop Deacon Frost from becoming an all-powerful blood god and gaining dominance over humanity. Apart from the constant F-bombs, what makes this film so dark are the violent action scenes and innovative vampire death sequences, which feature an unusual amount of blood for a superhero movie of that era. It opens with an underground rave party where a man is lured in under false pretenses, which is later revealed to be a trap. Suddenly, the sprinklers get activated and it starts raining blood on the dance floor, which makes the vampires hungrier and more dangerous. As they start attacking the scared man, Blade arrives and wreaks havoc using his weapons and kung fu skills. It is one of the most iconic opening scenes in modern horror cinema and serves as a great introduction to the raw and bloody world we will get for the rest of the film. Even though some of the special effects have aged poorly, the atmospheric world-building and innovative action sequences make this a must-watch for fans of stylish and mature superhero cinema. Joker 2019. Although not exactly a superhero film in the traditional sense, Joker is still one of the most visceral and bleak character studies featuring a DC Comics character. Directed by Todd Phillips, it reimagines the origin of Batman's deadliest foe by borrowing elements from Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver and the King of Comedy, exploring the psyche of a deeply troubled man in a morally decaying Gotham City, where Thomas Wayne is still alive. Arthur Fleck is a meek and mentally disturbed clown who suffers from a rare neurological condition that causes sudden bursts of laughter. He lives with his mother in a garbage-filled Gotham City, which is rapidly turning against people like him. Throughout most of the movie, Arthur is beaten, abused, mocked, and manipulated by everyone he meets, and after being pushed past his breaking point, he embraces the darkness and becomes a twisted variant of the Clown Prince of Crime. It features a lot of gory violence, especially the infamous subway sequence and Randall's death, but the way the film deals with the themes of social alienation, mental abuse, and trauma makes it the darkest entry in the list. One moment that stuck with me was the stairway dancing sequence, which might feel harmless on the surface, but becomes deeply sinister considering everything that happens before it. Joaquin Phoenix's Oscar-winning performance as Arthur has the right balance of pathos and expressive physical acting. However, what separates Joker from countless other anti-hero flicks is its refusal to glamorize and justify his evil acts. Instead, it looks at his misery objectively. If you still haven't watched Joker, let this list serve as a reminder for you to experience the darkest and most depressing supervillain origin stories ever portrayed in cinema. Logan 2017. Since the character's very first appearance in Bryan Singer's PG-13 X-Men back in 2000, fans had been waiting for a true blue Wolverine film that goes in tune with the character's ultra-violent nature from the comics. 17 years later, in Logan, we finally got the R-rated film which goes back to his bloody roots and also makes us sympathize with his tragedy, thanks to a powerful lead performance by Hugh Jackman. Directed by James Mangold, who also helmed The Wolverine, the film also features Patrick Stewart, Boyd Holbrook, Stephen Merchant, and Daphne Keane in crucial roles. Set in 2029, when mutants are nearly extinct, it follows an aging Logan and a dying Professor X as they try to protect a young mutant named Laura, who has similar powers like Wolverine, from the supervillain group known as the Reavers. Based loosely on Mark Millar and Steve McNiven's Old Man Logan comic arc, the film is pretty realistic in its depiction of violence. It has multiple gory shots of claws going through skulls, chests, and other body parts, but they are not at all overly stylized. Instead, it has a distinctly melancholic tone, which also asks important questions about mortality, legacy, and loss through the lens of the superhero genre. Like I mentioned, it has a lot of dark moments, but the one that disturbed me the most featured the young girl Laura, or X-23, who kills an entire squad of trained Reavers in a fit of rage, displaying the same cold-blooded expertise that Logan spent almost decades to suppress within himself, making us realize that she is also doomed to follow the violent path. Regardless of the disturbing scenes, Logan still remains the best example for a superhero movie that transcends its source material and becomes a cinematic masterpiece that just happens to have mutants in it. The Crow, 1994. The Crow is one of those rare films where real-life events overshadow the narrative so much that a sense of sadness lingers in every single frame that you watch. I am, of course, talking about the untimely death of star Brandon Lee, who passed away on set due to an unfortunate incident with a prop gun. In a strange case of real mimicking the real, that's R-E-A-L mimicking the R-E-E-L, this tragedy fits right in with the gloomy and gothic premise of the film and somehow makes it a haunting cinematic experience. Based on James O'Barr's comic book series and directed by Alex Proyas, it features Lee as Eric Draven, a rock musician who gets resurrected by a mysterious crow and seeks revenge from the gang who murdered him and his fiancée, Shelley. The film opens with the brutal killing of a couple in love, and from there, it doubles down on the graphic violence that justifies its R rating. Although I love all the sequences in the rain-soaked streets of Detroit, where Eric takes revenge on the gang members one by one, Micah's death scene stands out in particular for its unhinged brutality, delivering a darkly satisfactory payoff for the audience. Overall, the film is a well-made gothic superhero film that beautifully blends grief within the genre to create a bittersweet tale of vengeance that still holds up. Deadpool 2016. Next on the list is the Marvel character who, as we all know, can only really flourish in an R-rated film. Deadpool, starring Ryan Reynolds, Marina Baccarin, Ed Skrein, and T.J. Miller. After his widely criticized appearance in X-Men Origins Wolverine, Reynolds redeemed himself in this Tim Miller directorial, which had the Merc with a mouth gloriously breaking the fourth wall, along with a lot of bones throughout its 108 minutes of runtime. The story follows Wade Wilson as he hunts down the man who gave him a disfigured appearance and mutant abilities, becoming the anti-hero Deadpool in the process. The script by Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick captures the vibe of the comics perfectly and embraces the silly, irreverent side of the character that made him popular. Like all the other films in the list, Deadpool also has a lot of profanities, outrageous violence, and an overload of blood and gore. But what ties everything together is the consistent meta-humor and self-deprecating jokes that sets it apart from the other entries in the genre. But this doesn't mean the film plays it safe with the violence, be it the transformation sequence or the iconic highway fight scene where Deadpool shoots and kills people without a shred of remorse. The film commits to being as spectacularly violent as is possible within the limits of the genre. While the plot is very predictable, it is a wildly entertaining ride which helped start off the way for R-rated superhero movies in the current era with its unexpected box office success. Constantine 2005. When we talk about R-rated superhero flicks, the one film that rarely comes up in these conversations is the 2005 Keanu Reeves starrer Constantine. Directed by Francis Lawrence and loosely based on the Hellblazer comics, it also stars Tilda Swinton, Rachel Weisz, Shia LaBeouf, and Peter Stormare in the lead roles. Detective Angela Dodson seeks help from a chain-smoking demon hunter, John Constantine, to solve the mysterious death of her twin sister Isabel. As he begins his investigation, he realizes that a larger conspiracy is afoot and the demons want to enter the mortal world. In his attempt to stop the demons, Constantine gets into a direct confrontation with Satan. Although the film has some real flaws, especially the unintentionally funny climax, it successfully blends horror with the superhero genre through unsettling demonic imagery, supernatural occurrences, and a great villain in the form of Gabriel. Ironically enough, the demonic and supernatural imagery was the primary reason the film received an R rating. Unlike the other movies in the list, this one is darker, less because of gore and more because of the imagery and the overall tone. The film also has many sequences of self-harm, which can be disturbing for some viewers. It also features creepy monsters with half of their head missing, which are genuinely some of the most horrific creatures in modern horror cinema. But the scenes where Constantine performs an exorcism are genuinely disturbing as it blurs the boundary between superhero optimism and supernatural possession. In spite of its uneven nature, this underrated superhero film is carried almost entirely by a dry, yet convincing lead performance from Keanu Reeves. The Suicide Squad 2021. Directed by James Gunn and featuring a mostly new cast from the 2016 original, The Suicide Squad follows Task Force X on a mission to the island nation of Corto Maltese to destroy a giant starfish alien called Starro the Conqueror before the local government gets into the matter. Margot Robbie, Viola Davis, Jay Courtney, and Joel Kinnaman reprise their roles from the previous films and are joined by Idris Elba, David Dastmalchian, Daniela Melchior, John Cena, and Sylvester Stallone, among others. What makes this film so discomforting is not any particular scene, though there are plenty of them as well, but the narrative structure itself. As you can already guess, the film introduces a new set of squad members in the beginning, but then kills a huge chunk of them in the first 20 minutes of the film. This pattern of shocking death continues throughout, which makes you feel shocked and disturbed at the same time. However, the film doesn't disappoint with the gore either. There are lots of beheadings, bloody fight scenes, and bodies sliced in half throughout the film. The standouts, though, are all of the ones featuring King Shark, who has some of the funniest and most brutal kills in the movie. This seamless mix of comedy and brutality makes this one of the most entertaining superhero films ever made, where you will be grossed out in one scene and choked up in the next throughout its 132 minutes runtime. Punisher Warzone 2008. I know it can be a controversial take, but hear me out. I think the best live-action version of Frank Castle the Punisher is Ray Stevenson, who played the character in the 2008 flick Punisher Warzone. No disrespect to John Bernthal, who brings great depth to the role, but Stevens expertly balances the raw physical menace and cynicism of Punisher with the tragic undertone of Frank. This makes him the perfect embodiment of comic book writer Garth Ennis's take on the character, the same run which inspired this Lexi Alexander reboot. But the similarity to Ennis's run doesn't end there. The movie also adapts the grounded and violent tone of the comics, making this easily the most graphically violent entry on this list. It follows Punisher as he wages war on organized crime in New York, but gets pulled into a bigger conflict with the mob boss Jigsaw. The film is shot like a live-action comic book, and that is especially evident in the way it handles the brutal action scenes where head gets separated from bodies mid-frame, faces get blown away by a shotgun at close range, and necks get slashed. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. The plot is intentionally wafer-thin. It exists only to set up visceral and relentless action set pieces that are genuinely well executed throughout. So, if you like your superhero movies to be loud and dumb with a lot of gore in them, then Punisher Warzone will fit right up your alley. Watchmen 2009. Adapting one of the most acclaimed graphic novels ever written, Zack Snyder's Watchmen manages to be equally disturbing and bleak as the source material, sometimes even more so, largely due to his trademark slow-motion style, which emphasizes on the brutality of the action set pieces. Set in an alternate 1985 where superheroes are deemed illegal by the government, the story follows a small group of retired heroes investigating the murder of one of their former teammates. As the case progresses, the group unravels a larger conspiracy questioning the very need to protect humanity. The film has a lot of elements which can unsettle the audience, including a lot of swearing, brief yet graphic violence, and a particularly traumatizing murder of a pregnant woman. But the one that genuinely shook me was an extended flashback featuring Walter Kovacs, or Rorschach. As Kovacs tracks down kidnapper Gerald Grice in relation to a missing girl, he discovers that Grice has already killed her and fed her to his dogs. This incident psychologically breaks Rorschach, and he kills the dogs and then repeatedly stabs Grice's head with a cleaver. Although this scene also existed in the original comic by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, Snyder's use of silhouettes and tight close-ups makes it a very discomforting experience. Although it is a deeply uncomfortable watch filled with dense mythology and cynical overtones, Watchmen is an essential viewing for anyone who wants to see superheroes portrayed in a realistic setting, being as flawed and conflicted as their human counterparts. Kick-Ass 2010. The next film on the list is Matthew Vaughn's Kick-Ass, adapted from Mark Miller and John Romita Jr.'s comic of the same name. Starring Aaron Taylor Johnson, Chloe Grace Moretz, Nicolas Cage, and Mark Strong, it follows an ordinary teenager, Dave Lazowski, who gets inspired by comic books and becomes a real-life superhero with the alias Kick-Ass. Soon, Dave crosses paths with Big Daddy and Hit Girl, who wants to bring down notorious crime lord Frank D'Amico. Although the film centers on young adult protagonists, it has a lot of gritty and violent action sequences, which acts as a shocking yet effective subversion for the audience. But what makes this contrast more disturbing is the foul-mouthed character of Hit Girl, who goes on a rampage mode and slices a room full of gangsters with her weapons, specifically in two of the film's most outrageous sequences. Both of them show a generous amount of blood spattering around and are intercut with cheerful songs, turning them into thrilling and sinister set pieces for the audience, precisely because all of this is being done by a remorseless young girl. The film is a well-made and stylized deconstruction of the genre, anchored by a captivating performance from Chloe Grace Moretz that still sends chills down my spine, even after 16 years of its release. Zack Snyder's Justice League 2021. We finish this list with what is undoubtedly the most talked about superhero film of the last 5 years. Not because of its content, but the journey it had from a viral internet campaign to a 4-hour movie. Justice League Snyder Cut is a vast improvement over the PG-13 theatrical version of Justice League 2017, embracing a darker tone with a healthy dose of violence, which the studio trimmed previously to appeal to a larger section of audience. The Snyder Cut focuses more on the backstory of League members like Cyborg and Flash, and also on the motivation of Darkseid's Lieutenant Steppenwolf, which makes us care for the character's journey. However, this version also emphasizes a lot on gore, which is especially visible in the graphic battle scene in Themyscira. But what makes this version more distinct than the original cut is the sense of an overwhelming despair, which is present throughout the film. Although it retains many of the fun sequences from the 2017 cut here, it feels forced, and instead the existential gloom pervades all the characters. This bleakness makes for a tonal disparity since it essentially tells the story of the triumph of good over evil. However, the film balances this difference in the end, as the heroes save the world and try making every day better with their newfound wisdom. Overall, the film is a much more cohesive take on the Justice League, which has a strong emotional core and a great epilogue which makes you wonder about the fate of the DCEU if Snyder was still in charge. So that's all from my side. Do you agree with our list? Tell us in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you at the next one.